It's a pleasure to be here. I was first diagnosed in November of 2014, so it is now 8 years of survival, which is amazing, and it's a testament to the advances that have been made in precision medicine in the last 8 years. And my journey kind of encompasses this development. When I was first diagnosed, it was basically standard surgery and chemo. There was no discussion about sequencing or biomarkers. Effectively, cancer was treated based on the origin of the disease. So I had colon cancer, and therefore I received standard protocol of chemotherapy. Initially, there was success because I was in remission, but it was brief. And I quickly developed from a stage 3 to a stage 4 with spread into the abdomen. And once again, was given at the time, I guess it was considered a little bit more of an advanced treatment, which was the HIPEC surgery, where they combine the surgery to remove the disease in the abdomen and put warm chemo into you while you're on the operating table. Of course, that type of surgery is has a lot of side effects and is a very tough one to recover from. And from what I'm seeing, is being less encouraged, given that overall statistics are not bearing out the benefit versus the side effect cost and the recovery cost. I was then in another brief remission, but then had a recurrence in 2018 that was a serious recurrence with spread into organs and bone. And at that point, the only systemic type of treatment I could receive was through a clinical trial. And I was fortunate to be enrolled in an immunotherapy trial in Montreal, which initially appeared to be working, but ultimately there was progression. And because of that, I was required to exit the study. I was given then a fourth line, which was toxic. And at that point, the situation was quite dire. I was lucky to be able to get a consult with a GI oncologist in San Diego. And now we're talking about the fall of 2018, and the landscape had changed quite a bit. Before this doctor wanted to meet with me and discuss my case, he told me that I should have my tumor sequenced. And in addition, the company that did the sequencing also sequenced my germline. And this was very significant because prior to that point, the doctors, certainly my local doctors, were very pessimistic about my chances of survival, given the spread of disease and given the statistics for stage 4 metastatic colon cancer. The report came back from the sequencing, which showed a germline mutation. And this was an important factor in the second opinion, which didn't rely only on the sequencing, but based on other factors, including family history and my experience with the initial clinical trial. The doctor felt that even though the immunotherapy treatment he was recommending was not within FDA approval, that I would still be a good candidate to try this treatment. So even though I wasn't in a formal clinical trial, it was almost as if it was a clinical trial for one, because I was receiving this treatment on a kind of experimental basis. And incredibly, after 3 rounds of treatment, the tumors started to shrink. And throughout the course of the immunotherapy treatments that I received, the disease continued to go away to the point that I was able to cut my pain medication because I had suffered with a lot of pain due to bone mets. And I was able to really regain not just my life, but living my life in a much more active manner. What I saw in my own experience through this period of time was the development of a more biomarker based approach to cancer treatment rather than a disease locality. So, for instance, instead of looking at stage 4 colon cancer with all of the dire prognosis attached to that, when the analysis was done of my DNA and my genetic makeup, this opened the door to a treatment that was highly effective and not only extended my life, but has given me back my life in a significant way. So, one of the main points of this conference is that the patient is to be considered the center of the approach to research. And I think my case illustrates this in a significant way because, on paper, looking at certain of the factors, many doctors would come to the conclusion that my prognosis would be very, very poor. But when putting the whole picture together of me as an individual patient, along with family history, disease history, and biomarkers, the conclusion to attempt a treatment for me ended up with tremendous results. And that's the point of all of this. We all need treatments that will work for us as individuals. And whereas a cure for cancer as a whole may be too far a reach, we can each find our own treatments that help us as individuals. In my case, I was diagnosed in 2014, and at the time, certainly the feeling was that a clinical trial was a last resort. So a patient would receive the standard of care surgery and chemotherapy for the most part. And if you were lucky, you went into remission. If you were unlucky, you had recurrence, which meant more surgery and or chemotherapy. Ultimately, if you failed all of the lines of treatment, you might look for a clinical trial, almost like a Hail Mary, to try to see if there was something that could help prolong your life. And at a minimum, the feeling was, certainly the feeling I had was, at least we would be contributing to the advancement of the science, which was so important. So for me, I was in a clinical trial after 3 lines of treatment. And after I exited that trial because I had progression, I had a 4th line of treatment that was toxic. And then I received immunotherapy on, I will call it an experimental basis, because it was not in a formal trial, but it was not under an approval. It was given to me off-label and was highly successful, and not only saved my life, I am currently no evidence of disease, which is an incredible result given how advanced the metastatic disease was. What I've seen in the last number of years is a much different approach to clinical trials, and this is the approach that I take when dealing with a cancer patient that reaches out to me as an advocate. Namely, first step, sequencing biomarkers and determine the genetic makeup of your disease. And secondly, look for the most appropriate treatment for your specific biomarker disease. And in many cases, that may be a clinical trial, even as early as a first line of treatment. We've seen research showing that for certain biomarkers, a clinical trial giving, for example, either immunotherapy or perhaps even a biomarker targeted treatment, for example, for KRAS mutations, might offer the best results and at the same time avoid some of what I went through, which was repeated chemotherapy that was not successful with lifelong side effects, including permanent neuropathy that I have, and instead going towards a treatment that could deliver the best results. And there's a second aspect to it as well that I see quite a lot. Many times when patients reach out to me, they've already been through one or two lines of treatment and they are weakened. The disease is weakening them and the treatments are weakening them. And to the extent that a trial offers a potential targeted or appropriate treatment, many of these patients do not have the strength to travel potentially to get to that trial or even endure the medications that they would receive on the trial. Because having been through chemotherapy, radiation therapy, as well as immunotherapy, they're all different, but they all have debilitating side effects. And there's only so much that a body can handle. So that's why I try to stress to the people that I talk to how important it is to not only determine your biomarkers, but to get second opinion, third opinion, look for trials. The trials might offer the most appropriate and treatment with the best possible outcomes. But even more recently, and it's very exciting, I'm seeing trials for lower stage cancer patients, stage 2 and stage 3. We've all seen this rectal cancer trial for lower stage, which not only delivered tremendous results in terms of getting rid of the tumors, it avoided the standard surgery. And with certain types of cancer, especially GI cancers, surgery often will result in permanent ostomy or other matters that will affect your digestive system long term. So this is a situation where lower stage patients in a neoadjuvant scenario would be greatly benefited by a clinical trial. And that's a radically new way of looking at clinical trials as far as I'm concerned. I've also seen cases where stage 3 patients are receiving immunotherapy in post-surgery rather than the standard chemo that I received, and are getting very good results as well, which would have a greater chance of avoiding the recurrences that I suffered from, as well as reducing or eliminating some of the long-term side effects that you get from long exposure to chemotherapy. So when we put all of that together, we see that clinical trial landscape now is not last resort for metastatic patients that are basically without any hope other than crossing their fingers as a last resort. But it's a tool in the toolbox that could be appropriate for a wide range of cancer patients at various stages of disease, to provide the best outcomes for each of these individuals. And one of the things that I did want to get across today, given that this is a patient-centric approach to clinical trials, is the role of the patient and the patient advocate. And I think that number one, it's important for clinicians and researchers to remember that a patient is more than biomarkers and data and DNA and mutations. There's an actual person who's a patient, who's dealing with serious disease, life-threatening disease, dealing with all kinds of anxiety and other issues. And I think it's important never to lose sight that even though we are happy to help with research and move science forward, we're still people that need to be acknowledged in that scenario. We call ourselves guinea pigs, but we aren't guinea pigs. We're human beings. And the last point that I'd like to conclude with is patients like myself who have been through 8 years of treatment, trials, standard of care, protocols, surgeries. We have a lot to offer the research community. We're here to spread awareness, but we're also here to say we want to be involved, we want to participate, we want to help you design your trials in a way that will be the most effective and will be the most helpful to the patients undergoing the trials. So remember us as patients and remember us as patient advocates. Thank you.